Everyone around you is taking notes, not on paper, not consciously, but they are cataloging you with every conversation, every reaction, every moment you let something slip. And most people have no idea this is happening. You walk through life believing that the people closest to you simply know you. What Machiavelli understood is that knowing someone and studying someone are two entirely different things. One is passive, the other is strategic. Most people assume the world operates on goodwill. They assume that when they share a fear, someone receives it with care. They assume that when they admit a weakness, it disappears after the conversation ends. It does not disappear. It gets stored, not always with malicious intent, but stored nonetheless. And stored information becomes usable information at the right moment. That is the part nobody tells you. Think about the last time you told someone what truly bothers you, what genuinely frightens you, what makes you feel invisible, rejected, or worthless. You probably told yourself it was honesty. You probably told yourself it was connection. But somewhere in that exchange, you handed someone a map of exactly where you break. Machiavelli was not a villain. He was an observer. He spent his life studying power not as something noble, but as something real. And what he observed was that people rarely attack visible strength. They circle it. They wait. They look for the crack. Because the crack is where leverage lives. This is not a dark fantasy about paranoia. This is a pattern that repeats across every social environment you have ever been inside. The workplace where someone knew your financial desperation before you did. The friendship where someone understood your need for validation before you understood it yourself. The relationship where someone learned what silence does to you and used it without ever calling it strategy. This is not rare behavior. This is human behavior. People are wired to seek advantage, not because they are evil, because survival has always required understanding the people around you faster than they understand themselves. Machiavelli documented this not to celebrate it, but to make sure that the aware person is never the last to see it. The dangerous thing is not weakness itself. Every person breathing carries weakness inside them. Weakness is human. Weakness is inevitable. The dangerous thing is publicly displaying weakness without awareness of who is watching and what they will do with what they see. There is a critical difference between feeling something and broadcasting it. There is a critical difference between processing emotion and performing it in front of an audience that has not earned that access. Most people collapse that distinction completely. They feel something, and immediately they need someone to know they feel it. Not because sharing will solve anything, because the discomfort of holding it alone is too high. And that urgency, that need to release internal pressure through external validation, is precisely where most people lose power without ever realizing it happened. Machiavelli understood that the prince who reveals his fears invites the very threats he fears, not metaphorically, literally. When people sense uncertainty in someone who is supposed to be steady, they do not feel more connected to that person. They feel less safe with them. And people who feel less safe around you begin to calculate differently. They begin to wonder whether you can hold up under pressure, whether you will make decisions from fear or from clarity, whether your next move will be strategic or reactive. And once that wondering begins, your position shifts, not dramatically, subtly, the way status always shifts, in the margins, in the pauses, in the way people start looking at you slightly differently when they think you cannot tell. Watch what happens in any group when someone loses emotional control publicly. Not the anger itself, what happens after. The room recalibrates. People update their internal model of that person. The update rarely goes upward. This is not cruelty. This is automatic. Human beings are constantly running threat assessments on the people around them, constantly measuring who is stable and who is volatile, who can hold pressure and who will crack under it. These assessments happen without words, without meetings, without anyone deciding to make a judgment. They happen because the brain is always processing social information for one purpose: to understand what kind of power the people around you actually carry. Now apply that to modern life. Look at what social media has done to the architecture of personal exposure. There is now an entire ecosystem built around rewarding public vulnerability. Post your pain and receive attention. Share your breakdown and receive engagement. Confess your deepest insecurity and receive the temporary warmth of strangers who do not actually know you, but now hold information about what controls your emotional state. The platform rewards the exposure. The platform does not survive the consequences with you. 6 months later, when someone in your professional world has seen that post, when a person you are trying to impress has already cataloged your fragilities from a comment thread at 2 in the morning, the platform is not in that room with you. You are alone with what you gave away for free. Machiavelli would have found modern social media to be the most efficient vulnerability extraction system ever built. Not because the people on it are predators, because the structure itself rewards confession without discretion. And indiscriminate confession is not courage. It is exposure without consent to outcomes you cannot fully predict. The argument here is not that you should become cold. It is not that you should build walls so high that nothing real can enter. That path leads to isolation, not power. The argument is awareness, radical, uncomfortable, disciplined awareness of what you share, with whom, in what context, and at what cost. Because not everyone who asks how you are actually wants to know. Some people ask because the answer is useful. Some people ask because they are measuring the distance between where you are and where you are supposed to be. Some people ask because your vulnerability confirms something about themselves they need confirmed. And almost none of them will tell you which category they are operating from. You have to know. You have to develop the kind of perception that reads not just what people say, but what they do with what you give them. Notice who becomes warmer when you are struggling. Notice who pulls back when you are strong. Notice who only seems to engage with the version of you that needs something. That information is more valuable than anything you were about to share. The people who deserve your interior are the ones who have demonstrated through action and consistency that they will not use it as a map. Everyone else gets the version of you that functions, not the fake version, the version that holds. There is enormous strength in the ability to feel something without immediately externalizing it. There is enormous power in the person who processes internally, who sits with discomfort without needing to dissolve it through confession, who understands that not every emotion requires an audience. Machiavelli did not write about this directly, but everything he wrote about power points toward it. The prince who cannot govern his own reactions cannot govern anything else. Self-mastery is not self-suppression. Self-mastery is knowing which parts of yourself are yours to keep and which parts are safe to share, and making that decision from clarity rather than urgency. Most people make exposure decisions from urgency. They share because they need relief. They confess because the weight is too heavy. They reveal because silence feels like suffocation. And in those moments of urgency, they hand people information they will never get back. Think about whether someone in your life right now understands you or understands how to manage you. Those are different things. One person sees who you are. The other person sees which buttons produce which responses. The terrifying part is that from the outside, these two things can look identical for a very long time, until they do not. Until the moment something shifts and you realize the person you trusted with your interior was operating from a very different understanding of the relationship than you were. Machiavelli would not have been surprised. He would have said you gave them everything they needed to build that position, not because you were weak, because you were unaware, because you confused intimacy with indiscriminate openness, because you believed that sharing everything meant you were brave when what it actually meant was that you had not yet learned the difference between depth and exposure. Real depth requires trust built over time. Real depth is earned through demonstrated discretion. Real depth is something you extend to someone after watching what they do with small pieces of you before you hand them the larger ones. Most people skip that process entirely. They go straight to the core because they are lonely, because they need to be known, because the modern world has created a level of disconnection so severe that any moment of apparent understanding feels like oxygen. And that loneliness is real. That need to be seen is real. But exploiting it is also real. And the two exist in the same space at the same time. The awareness of both is what separates the person who moves through the world with power from the person who wonders why they keep getting outmaneuvered by people they trusted. Real power is not performing invincibility. It is not building an image so armored that nothing genuine lives inside it. That is not strength. That is fear wearing a different mask. Real power is deciding who deserves access to you. Real power is the controlled transparency of a person who chooses what to reveal, when to reveal it, and to whom. Not from coldness, from clarity, not from suspicion. From self-knowledge deep enough to know what is precious and what requires protection. Strength is not the absence of vulnerability. Strength is the governance of it. The person who has mastered this does not walk through rooms looking for threats. They simply know what they carry. They know its value, and they do not leave it unattended. From this point forward, you will move through conversations differently. You will notice the questions people ask and wonder what they are building with your answers. You will feel the old urgency to share and pause before you obey it. You will look at the people closest to you and ask a question that will not be comfortable. Do they know you? Or do they know how to reach you? Because those two things look identical until the moment they do not. And by then, the map is already in someone else's hands.